There was something oddly peaceful about the weight of my wedding ring in my palm. It felt heavier than I remembered, as if all the years of my marriage had condensed into that small band of gold. I ran my thumb over it, tracing the familiar ridges, the tiny scratch near the edge from the time Lillian dropped it in the sink. Funny, back then she was so flustered, apologizing over and over, as if a little scratch could break something as strong as our marriage. I had laughed it off, told her it gave the ring character. Now, as I sat in this dimly lit cafe, watching her across the room with another man, that scratch felt like an omen I had ignored for far too long. I wasn't supposed to be here. Lillian thought I was out of town for work, but something inside me, something primal, something I had tried to silence, told me to check. And so here I was, blending into the background while my wife leaned in too close, laughed too freely, touched his wrist like she had once touched mine. I should have been furious. I should have felt rage bubbling up inside me. But all I felt was an eerie calm, like I had stepped out of my own body and was watching someone else's life crumble. My chest felt hollow, my fingers numb. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Instead, I stood up, slowly, deliberately. My feet felt heavier than they should, as if they too were resisting the truth of what I was about to do. I crossed the room, my heartbeat steady, each step measured. Lillian didn't notice me at first. She was too busy living in her perfect little fantasy, where her husband didn't exist and her lover was the only man in the world. But then she looked up, and in that single second, I saw everything. The shock, the panic, the guilt. Her lover turned too, confusion flickering across his face. He didn't recognize me, of course. He didn't. I wasn't a part of the world they had built for themselves. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my wedding ring, and placed it on the table between them. A little something to remember me by, I said, my voice calm, controlled, too controlled. Lillian's lips parted, but no words came out. The man beside her shifted uncomfortably. And then, just as I turned to walk away, she whispered something that made my stomach drop, something that would change everything. Wait, you don't understand. But the truth was, I understood far too well. The question was, what was I going to do next? I froze, not because I wanted to, but because my body wouldn't move. My mind screamed at me to walk away, to leave her there with her pathetic excuse for a lover, to let her drown in whatever words she was about to spill. But something about her voice, about the way it trembled, held me in place. I turned back slowly, my eyes locking onto hers for the first time since I had arrived. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't glowing with excitement or looking at him with the kind of admiration she used to reserve for me. No, she looked afraid. You don't understand? I repeated, my voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the air between us. Help me, Lillian. Help me understand how my wife, the woman I trusted with everything, is sitting here with another man like I don't even exist. Her fingers twitched against the tablecloth, her eyes darting to her lover, then back to me. I could see the gears turning in her head, scrambling to come up with something, anything that would make this moment salvageable. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off before she had the chance. No, I said firmly. I don't want excuses. I don't want some half-baked lie to soften the blow. Just tell me the truth. Is this what you want? The man beside her, let's call him the stranger for now, shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't expecting this. He was waiting for me to explode, to cause a scene, to maybe even throw a punch. But I didn't. My anger wasn't the loud, reckless kind. It was cold, controlled. Lillian swallowed hard, and I could see her hands shaking now. She was nervous. Good. She should be. This isn't what it looks like, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I almost laughed. Isn't what it looks like? How cliché could she get? I leaned in slightly, just enough to watch her squirm. So you weren't sitting here flirting with another man? You weren't touching him the way you used to touch me? You weren't. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. Lillian, I'm not an idiot. Whatever pathetic excuse you're about to give me, save it. I already know what this is. The stranger finally decided to speak. Hey man, maybe we should. I held up a hand, silencing him without even sparing him a glance. I wasn't talking to you. He immediately shut his mouth, shifting uncomfortably again. Maybe he thought this would be easier. Maybe he thought I'd storm in, yell at Lillian, call her names, and stomp off like a broken man. But I wasn't giving either of them that satisfaction. Lillian let out a shaky breath, and for the first time, I saw something beneath her guilt, something deeper. It wasn't just fear, it was regret. She looked down at the ring still sitting on the table, the one I had placed there as a final symbolic gesture. She reached for it, but I covered it with my hand before she could take it. "Don't," I said, my voice lower now. "You don't get to keep this like some kind of souvenir." She bit her lip, looking like she wanted to cry, and for a second, a stupid, fleeting second, I almost felt bad. But then I reminded myself of where we were. I reminded myself of why we were here in the first place. I stood up straighter, fixing my posture, pulling myself together. "You had a choice, Lillian, and you made it." I slid the ring toward myself, gripping it between my fingers. "But you don't get to decide how this ends." "I do." I turned to leave, but this time she reached for me, her fingers barely grazing my wrist before I pulled away. "Please," she whispered. I stopped, but I didn't turn back. "Please what?" I asked, my voice hollow. There was a long silence before she finally answered. And when she did, her words knocked the air from my lungs. "Please listen to me before you decide to walk away." I could have left. I should have left. But against all logic, against every screaming instinct in my body, I pulled out the chair and sat back down. "Fine," I said. "Talk." But what she told me next shattered everything I thought I knew. Lillian inhaled deeply, her fingers twitching against the tablecloth as if she was deciding where to begin. Her eyes darted between me and him, the man she had been with just moments ago, before finally settling on me. There was something different in her gaze now, less panic, more calculation. I recognized that look. It was the same one she used when she was about to say something she knew I wouldn't want to hear. "I didn't plan for this," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't wake up one morning and decide to." I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Stop." I shook my head, exhaling sharply. "I told you, I don't want a rehearsed excuse. I don't need you to tell me how you accidentally fell into another man's arms." I gestured toward him without even looking at him. "Just tell me why. No sugarcoating, no lies." Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Then finally she spoke. "Because I don't feel like myself with you anymore." Silence. For a second, her words didn't register. I replayed them in my head, trying to make sense of what she had just said. Out of all the things I had expected, denial, apologies, anger, this wasn't one of them. I leaned back in my chair, processing. "You don't feel like yourself," I repeated slowly. "And that's my fault?" Lillian shook her head, her blonde hair falling over her shoulders as she sighed. "It's not about fault. It's about change. I changed. We changed." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You mean you changed? I've been the same husband you married, Lillian. I've supported you, loved you, done everything I could to make sure you were happy. And now you're telling me you outgrew me." She winced at the sharpness of my words, but she didn't deny it. That stung more than anything else. I turned to the man beside her, who had wisely stayed silent through most of this. "And you? You're the new version of herself she wants to be." He shifted uncomfortably. I could tell he wasn't expecting me to acknowledge him directly. Finally, he cleared his throat and muttered, "I didn't know she was married at first." I clenched my jaw, barely containing the urge to laugh. "But you do now, and yet here you are." He looked away. "Coward." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "So what now, Lillian? Do you want me to beg you to stay? Do you want me to pretend this never happened?" I shook my head. "I already gave you the ring. That was me letting you go." Her hands curled into fists, her breathing shaky. "That's just it," she whispered. "I don't know what I want." I stared at her, searching for the woman I had married, the woman who used to be my best friend, my partner, the love of my life. But she wasn't there anymore. Or maybe she had been gone for a long time and I had just refused to see it. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. "Well, Lillian, let me make it easy for you." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "You don't have to decide. Because I already did." I turned and walked away, not sparing her or her lover another glance. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay here. But what I didn't know was that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I stepped out of the cafe, and the cool evening air hit me like a slap. It felt almost surreal, like I had just walked off a stage, leaving behind a scene that wasn't really my life. But it was my life, and I had just watched it unravel in front of me. My marriage, my trust, everything I thought was solid. It had all cracked apart like fragile glass. I don't remember walking to my car. I don't remember turning the key in the ignition. All I remember is gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, my pulse drumming in my ears like a war drum. I didn't feel sadness. Not yet, just numbness. Like my mind was trying to shield me from the weight of what had happened. I could have driven anywhere, but instead I found myself pulling into the driveway of a house that wasn't mine. My brother's house. Nathan opened the door almost immediately, probably because I had called him on the way, and my voice must have told him everything he needed to know. He took one look at me and stepped aside, wordlessly inviting me in. No small talk, no questions, just quiet understanding. I sank into his couch, running my hands through my hair. "She was with someone else," I finally said, my voice hollow. Nathan exhaled sharply, rubbing his jaw. "Damn," he muttered. I had a feeling something was off, but I didn't want to say anything unless you saw it for yourself. I lifted my head. "Wait, what?" He hesitated. I noticed she was acting different, distant, always on her phone, distracted even when she was with you. But I figured it was just stress or something." I clenched my fists. How had I missed it? How had everyone seen it but me? I felt like an idiot, like I had been walking around blind while my own wife had been betraying me right under my nose. "She told me she doesn't feel like herself with me anymore," I said bitterly. "Like I'm some phase she grew out of." Nathan shook his head. "That's bullshit, and you know it." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I don't know what to do now." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "You move on. You don't let her mess with your head. She made her choice and you made yours. You walked away. That's what matters." I nodded slowly, but a part of me knew it wouldn't be that simple. Because even as I sat there, trying to convince myself that it was over, that I was done with her, I had a sinking feeling in my gut that Lillian wasn't done with me. And I was right. I barely slept that night. Even with Nathan trying to distract me with bad TV and a bottle of whiskey, my mind kept replaying the scene at the cafe. The way Lillian had looked at me, the panic in her eyes, the sheer nerve of her saying I didn't understand. But what was there to understand? She had made her choice. I had made mine. It should have been over, except it wasn't. At some point past midnight, I gave up trying to sleep and stepped outside onto Nathan's back porch. The night was cool, the sky clear, and the silence was almost suffocating. I pulled out my phone, stared at the screen. No messages, no missed calls. I hated how much I wanted there to be. My thumb hovered over Lillian's name. I could have texted her, asked for answers, demanded an explanation, but what would that change? The truth was already out. I tossed my phone onto the porch railing and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. I was supposed to be angry, but all I felt was exhaustion. Then, just as I was about to head back inside, my phone buzzed. My heart lurched before my brain could even register the name on the screen. It wasn't Lillian. It was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering, pressing the phone to my ear. "Yeah." Silence, then a hesitant breath. "Is this Jacob?" The voice was female, unfamiliar. I frowned. "Who's asking?" A pause, then, "You don't know me, but I know your wife." Every muscle in my body tensed. "What? I don't know if I should be calling you, but I couldn't just sit on this." She exhaled shakily. "You need to know the truth about Lillian." I gripped the rail. "I already know enough." "No," she said firmly. You don't. What you saw tonight, that wasn't even the worst of it. I went still. My pulse pounded in my ears. Who are you? She hesitated. My name is Aaron. I work with Lillian, and I know what she's been up to. I know who that guy was, and I know this wasn't the first time. My stomach twisted. I wasn't sure why I was still listening, wasn't sure if I wanted to know more, but something about her voice, her urgency, kept me frozen in place. Meet me, Aaron said. Tomorrow. Please. I'll tell you everything. I should have hung up. I should have told her I didn't need more details, that I had already washed my hands of this whole thing. But instead, I heard myself say, "Where?" And just like that, I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. I barely got any sleep. The moment I hung up with Aaron, my mind refused to shut off. I kept replaying her voice, the hesitation in her words, the urgency in her tone. You don't know the full truth. What the hell was I supposed to do with that? I already knew Lillian had betrayed me. I had already seen it with my own eyes. What more could there possibly be? And why was some stranger, someone I had never even heard of before, so insistent on telling me more? By the time the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, I was running on nothing but caffeine and a storm brewing in my chest. I hadn't told Nathan about the call. He had already done enough by letting me crash at his place, and I didn't want to drag him any further into this mess. I left his house early, driving aimlessly for a while to settle my thoughts. I wasn't sure if I was actually going to meet Aaron. I told myself I didn't need to, that I didn't care anymore. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I needed answers, even if I hated what I was about to hear. When I finally arrived at the cafe Aaron had chosen, I parked my car and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. This was stupid. What was I expecting? Some grand revelation? Some piece of information that would magically make all of this make sense? But I couldn't walk away. Not yet. With a sigh, I got out and walked inside. The place was mostly empty, just a few people scattered at different tables. And then I saw her. Erin was younger than I expected. Mid-20s maybe, brown hair pulled into a messy bun. A nervous expression on her face as she stirred a cup of coffee she hadn't even taken a sip from. When she saw me, she straightened, waving me over. I sat across from her, studying her face. She looked familiar in a vague way, like someone I had probably walked past 100 times but never really noticed. You actually came, she said, her voice quiet. Guess I'm just curious, I said. You said you knew Lillian, that you knew what she was up to. So talk. She hesitated, glancing around as if making sure no one was listening. Then she leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. I've worked with Lillian for the past 2 years, she began. We weren't exactly close, but I knew enough about her life. She talked about you sometimes. At first, it seemed normal, just little complaints here and there, nothing major. But then, she swallowed, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. Then she changed. Changed how? I asked, my stomach tightening. Erin bit her lip. She started staying late at work a lot. At first, she said it was for extra projects, but then she'd slip up, say she was with someone instead of working with someone. She'd come in the next morning acting different, lighter, like she had no worries at all. I clenched my jaw, already hating where this was going. That man you saw her with last night, Erin continued. That wasn't just some random guy. That was Patrick, our boss. I went still. Lillian has been seeing him for months, Erin whispered. And I don't just mean meeting up for coffee. I mean full-on affair. Trips, hotel stays, late nights at work that weren't actually work. And the worst part, she hesitated. Everyone at the office knows. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to keep my expression neutral. But inside, my stomach twisted into knots. How long? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Erin exhaled. At least 6 months. Maybe longer. I only found out because I caught them once. After that, I started noticing things. And when I realized you had no idea, I couldn't keep it to myself. 6 months. For 6 months, I had been living a lie, sleeping next to a woman who was sneaking off with her boss, laughing at my obliviousness behind my back. I should have felt anger, rage, hatred, but all I felt was empty. Erin was watching me carefully. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know this doesn't fix anything, but I thought you deserved to know." I nodded slowly, my mind racing. "I appreciate it," I finally said, and I meant it. She had no reason to help me, no reason to get involved, but she had. I stood up, sliding a few bills onto the table for her coffee. "Take care, Erin." She hesitated. "What are you going to do now?" I let out a breath. "I have no idea." And that was the truth. I walked out of the cafe, stepping into the sunlight. I should have felt lost, but instead, for the first time in days, I felt something else entirely. Clarity. This wasn't just about Lillian betraying me. This was about who she betrayed me with, about how she did it. And now that I knew the truth, there was no turning back. She thought she could hide this forever. She thought I would never find out. She was wrong. I drove without a destination, letting the roads guide me while my mind churned through everything Erin had told me. 6 months. That number rattled around in my skull like loose change. How many nights had I fallen asleep thinking Lillian was working late? How many times had she smiled at me, kissed me, told me she loved me, only to turn around and give herself to someone else? I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. The anger was creeping in now, slow and steady, but I wasn't going to let it consume me. Not yet. I needed to stay sharp. I needed to think. Lillian hadn't just betrayed me. She had made me a fool. And the worst part, everyone at her office had known. While I was coming home to a woman who acted like everything was fine, her coworkers had been whispering behind my back, exchanging looks every time I showed up to one of her work events. I pulled into a parking lot, shutting off the engine. My heart was pounding, my thoughts a tangled mess. I couldn't just sit on this information. I needed more. I needed to see it for myself, and I knew exactly where to start. The visit to Lillian's office. An hour later, I found myself standing in the sleek, modern lobby of Lillian's office building. I had been here before. Christmas parties, client dinners, the occasional lunch date. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't here as her supportive husband. I was here as the man she had betrayed. The receptionist, a young guy with glasses and an awkward smile, looked up as I approached. "Can I help you?" I gave him my best polite expression. "I'm here to see Lillian." His smile faltered slightly, and for a brief second, I caught it. That flicker of recognition, of discomfort. He knew, but he nodded and picked up the phone. One moment. I folded my arms, glancing around the lobby. Employees came and went, some chatting, some rushing, but a few of them slowed when they saw me. Some whispered, "They know." I clenched my jaw. "She's in a meeting," the receptionist said after a moment, setting the phone down. "But you're welcome to wait." I forced a smile. "Thanks." I sat in one of the sleek, uncomfortable chairs, my leg bouncing with impatience. I wasn't sure what I expected, that she'd come rushing out, guilty and panicked, that someone would pull me aside and tell me the whole story. But then something unexpected happened. A woman, maybe in her 50s, walked past me, hesitated, then turned back. "You're Jacob, right?" she asked in a hushed voice. I looked up, studying her. "Yeah." She glanced around as if making sure no one was listening, then leaned in slightly. "You need to talk to Mike." I frowned. "Who's Mike?" She hesitated. "Patrick's assistant." My pulse quickened. She lowered her voice. "He knows more than anyone. If you really want the truth, find him." And just like that, she walked away, leaving me with more questions than ever. A new lead. I didn't know who this Mike was, but I knew one thing. I was going to find him. I wasn't just some clueless husband anymore. I was a man with answers to uncover, and I wasn't stopping until I had the whole truth. I didn't waste time. If there was one thing I had learned over the last few days, it was that the truth had a way of revealing itself if you were willing to chase it. Finding Mike wasn't hard. He was exactly where I expected him to be, in a cramped corner office that looked more like a storage closet than a workspace. He barely glanced up when I knocked, too busy typing furiously on his keyboard. "Mike?" I asked, stepping inside. He froze. Slowly, he looked up, his eyes widening slightly. "You're Jacob," I finished for him. "Lillian's husband." He swallowed, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble." "I'm not here for trouble," I said evenly. "I just want the truth." Mike exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, I figured this was coming." He gestured for me to shut the door, and when I did, he leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Patrick and Lillian. It's been going on for a while. At least a year." My stomach turned. A year. That was even longer than Erin had said. "She was never subtle about it," Mike continued, shaking his head. "She acted like no one noticed, but trust me, we all did. Patrick made sure she got the best assignments, the best projects, the easiest workload. She played the game well." I clenched my fists. "And you just let it happen?" Mike gave me a tired look. "What was I supposed to do? He's my boss. I can't exactly call him out on it." I couldn't argue with that, but it still didn't make it easier to hear. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. He hesitated, then sighed. "Because I've seen too many guys like you get screwed over, while people like them walk away without consequences." That hit harder than I wanted to admit. I nodded, absorbing everything. I had all the confirmation I needed. The truth was worse than I expected, but at least I had it now. And it was time to move on. The final goodbye. I didn't go home to Lillian that night. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I didn't even bother to confront Patrick. There was no point. The best revenge wasn't an explosion of anger. It was cutting her out of my life entirely. I filed for divorce the next morning. Lillian tried to call, but I didn't pick up. She sent messages, apologies, excuses, desperate pleas, but I ignored every single one. She made her choices. I was making mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I took time to heal, moved into a new apartment, reconnected with old friends, and somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like a man who had been betrayed. I felt like a man who had been given a second chance. Months later, as I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, I realized something. Lillian may have broken my trust, but she didn't break me. And that was the best ending I could have asked for.